You know, I know how you feel about Chomsky. Some of you love him to death. Some of you think, well, he just talks and talks and talks. And a lot of you don't like his stance on 9/11. I know some of you want him to be forceful about the Israeli issue with 9/11. I do know that his stance on the Palestinian issue is sometimes it's frustrating to some of you. It's definitely frustrating to me sometimes. And but I can tell you one thing, that when we announced that we will have Dr. Chomsky on the program, we received a lot of emails from you. Apparently, he has a lot of followers all over the world, because we received a lot of emails from his fans, a couple of them from people who criticize him, but a lot from his fans. So the man does command a huge follower. And so I understand he's with us now. Okay. Dr. Chomsky, can you hear me? Very good. Thank you, sir, for coming on the program. It's an honor to have you on. I want to start with a subject you probably had hundreds of interviews, if not thousands, which is 9/11. Most of the people that I talk to or I interview on this program, I normally ask them the question of, what do you think about 9/11? What happened on 9/11? But I'm not going to ask you that question. I'm going to be direct and ask you, who did 9/11 and why?
I think the best evidence that we have is that the story that was reported is basically correct. Airlines, there were hijackers. Their identities are more or less known. They hit the World Trade Center. One of them hit the Pentagon. One of the planes was stopped and downed in Pennsylvania. And there's no real evidence to suggest that that's wrong.
So are you saying that you are with the notion that an airplane hit the Pentagon?
Yeah, I think the evidence supports that.
Okay. And you are also with the same notion that the Twin Towers were destroyed due to these two airplanes hitting them?
As far as we know, there's no evidence to the contrary. No credible evidence to the contrary. I mean, if there were evidence, there's an easy way to determine whether there is persuasive evidence to the contrary. There are thousands of highly qualified civil and mechanical engineers and graduate schools of engineering all over the country. Those who think there's physical evidence to the contrary can find plenty of people with appropriate credentials to consult with, and if they can be convinced, I'm sure they would have no problem in publishing papers in serious journals, putting forth the evidence before the scientific community. Well, to my knowledge, that hasn't happened, so it's impossible to proceed.
What about the... now, one thing, why do you think the government is not coming out and showing us the videotapes from the Pentagon? I mean, they put out one said this is the evidence, but you really couldn't see anything. So why aren't they coming and saying, okay, this is exactly what happened, so stop all these conspiracy theories? Why they're not doing that?
Well, I suspect that part of the reason is that they don't mind the conspiracy theories very much. In fact, they get quite tolerant treatment. And I can only speculate here, but I suspect that the reason may be that they regard this as helpful to them, since there's a huge amount of energy and effort being directed into efforts to determine what's called 9/11 truth initiatives and so on. And that huge amount of effort is diverted away, necessarily, from inquiry, protest, and action concerning much worse crimes of the administration, far worse, against Americans as well. So, from their point of view, it may not be a bad thing. Actually, I'm speculating about their reasons. A way to determine their reasons would be to organize a congressional inquiry. There are congressmen who would be interested to investigate what is being withheld and why. Incidentally, it's perfectly standard for the government, any government, to try to withhold information from its own population. Anyone who's looked at the declassified record, as I have and others have, know that most of what appears there is an effort is not to protect national security. It's to protect the security of governments from their own populations, which they typically regard as a kind of an enemy. They don't want the population to know what they're doing. So withholding evidence is not unusual, but there are ways to proceed to bring it into the public. The easiest would be a congressional inquiry.
Now, in light of what you just said, and if you realize that Bush yesterday in an interview or a couple of days ago, which is nothing new, they've said this before, he said that that Saddam had the capacity, now the line is changing, that Saddam had the capacity to manufacture weapons of mass destruction. And then when he is asked, what does Iraq have to do with, because he mentioned that we lost 3,000 people in the Twin Towers, one of the questions was, what does Iraq have to do with that? And he said nothing. So,
correct.
You know,
correct. It has absolutely nothing to do with it.
Okay, so is that part of the evidence that you're talking about? That if they show the evidence, then
no, not at all.
Then there's another question about why we went and killed a couple of 100,000 Iraqis and 3,000 of us?
Yeah, we knew the reason for that. In fact, the Iraqis know the reason for that. The most recent poll in Iraq is just a couple of weeks ago, I think, by a U.S. investigating polling agency, found that I think it was 75% of Iraqis take for granted that the United States invaded Iraq to gain control of its oil. I think that was pretty obvious from the beginning.